Chapter 2.3a, which starts on page 103. Sample surveys in the real world. Sampling and non-sampling errors. The big idea for this one is how sample surveys go wrong. Alright? So the first part is sampling errors. It talks about, in the book, it talks about the sampling frame, which is the list of individuals that the samples are from. So if our sampling frame was probability and statistics, period 2, you guys would be the list that is the sampling frame, right? All of your names would be on it. So the first sampling error is a random sampling error. The deviation between sampling statistics and the population parameter, we've talked about how the parameter and the statistic are very rarely the same thing. You can only get close. You would only know the true parameter if you took a census where you are sampling every single person. Okay? So that's going to always have a little bit of error, which you see in the margin of error. To help fix that error, you choose a larger sample size. The larger the sample size, the smaller the margin of error. Okay? The second sampling error is bad sampling methods. We talked about this from 2.1. They're the voluntary response. Like when people call into a talk show, they feel strongly in one way. It creates a lot of bias. If you go back to 2.1, you can read about the talk of the town, which was on like the first page. Undercoverage. This is going to be the last sampling error. It occurs when certain groups are left out when choosing a sample. Like calling landlines, everybody who doesn't have a landline is going to be left out of that sample, right? Which in this day and age is huge. A lot of people don't have landlines, they just have cell phones. That would be like one of the undercoverage. In the book, it also goes over a couple other examples, so please make sure you read that. All right, then on to non-sampling errors. Okay. Non-sampling errors are not covered in the margin of error. So that plus or minus 4%, if that's your margin of error, that is not non-sampling errors. Non-sampling errors include processing errors, which is mistakes such as you are paying somebody to enter data into a computer, like you have all of the answers that you've gotten from your survey, but you're paying somebody else, or you have your student assistant entering it into the computer. Any error that they make when they're entering in numbers, that's going to be a processing error, okay, or anything similar like that. A response error occurs when a subject gives an incorrect response. In the book, it talks about that election where they had the African American running for some office. I can't remember which one it was. You might have heard about this in your like history or government classes. But when they're doing polling, and they stand outside the voting booth so that you go out and then they ask, well, how did you vote? So a lot of people were telling them, oh, I voted for the African American person, because they didn't want people to know that maybe they didn't want people to think that they were racist because they didn't vote for that person, but they really voted for the white person instead. So that creates a response error. It's when somebody's like lying about something they do, or if you ask somebody if they smoke or how much they smoke, they may lie about that because that's going to show up somewhere. They don't want people to know they smoke as much. Like if you're on a dating website and they're like, how much do you smoke, or do you smoke at all? Like a lot of people are going to lie about that, right? Or lie about your weight on your driver's license or something. That's going to be one of those response errors where the person giving the response is not giving a correct response. The last non-sampling error is going to be a non-response error, and that's the failure to obtain data from an individual selected for a sample. So that's like you call somebody's phone and they don't answer, or you call somebody's phone and they just hang up on you, which is what I do when they call and want to take and they want to take a survey, because I guess it is important, but at the same time I hate being on the phone and I hate taking the time to do that. So those three are non-sampling errors. They don't have anything to do about getting what samples you're actually taking. And they're not covered in the margin of error, so that's something you're not going to really know. The next section of this book, which I'll make a separate video about, is stratifying the samples and doing different things instead of just simple random samples to help alleviate some of these errors. But for right now, let's try practice problems 2.57 and 2.58 on page 110.